6 years I saved, dreaming of sunrises by the ocean, and in one instant I understood. I'd never see them. Everything evaporated, as if someone snapped their fingers and stole my life. 6 years. Claire reviewed the numbers in her ledger while coffee cooled in the blue mug, the same one she used every morning, bought on clearance 3 years ago. Each figure meant something. The sandwich she didn't buy, the shoes that lasted 6 months past their expiration date, the dinners she declined when she wanted to say yes. $58,000. The sum glowed on the calculator like a small victory. Enough for the down payment on a condo in Santa Monica. Enough to wake up to the sound of waves instead of the roar of Phoenix traffic. Enough to start a life where "I'll handle it myself" wouldn't be the first thing that flew from her lips. Claire closed the ledger and placed it precisely in the center of the table. 7:43 in the morning. 17 minutes before she had to leave. Time enough to wash the mug and mentally rehearse the conversation with her advisor. The apartment smelled of lemon cleaning solution and fresh coffee. Every surface spotless, every book arranged by height. The only photograph in the room, a landscape of the Pacific coastline. Not family, not friends. A daily reminder of what made 3 consecutive days of pasta worthwhile. At exactly 8 o'clock, Claire locked the door with 2 full turns of the key. The chain hung untouched. The mailbox empty. She'd collected the mail last night. Everything in order. The number 32 bus arrived on time. Coastal Federal Bank occupied a corner building downtown with tinted windows and automatic doors. Claire had been here so many times she'd memorized the floor tile pattern. Gray with white veining, 32 squares from the entrance to Gregory's desk. Gregory Foster, her financial advisor for the past 4 years. A man in his 40s, in understated ties and professional manners. He always remembered her name without checking the computer. But today, something was wrong. Gregory saw her and smiled, or rather, attempted to. The smile stretched, changed texture, like plastic instead of skin. His fingers drummed an uneven rhythm on the desk. His voice sounded too formal, as if he were reading from a corporate script. The air conditioning blew colder than usual, or maybe it was just Claire's shoulders tensing. She lowered herself into the faux leather chair opposite Gregory's desk and set her purse on her lap. He opened a folder, too thick for a conversation about interest rates. "Is there a problem with my account?" The words escaped faster than planned. Gregory extracted several documents and spread them on the desk like poker cards. "The bank has registered a consumer loan in your name, $23,800. The world tilted slightly to the left. Claire stared at the papers without touching them, as if they were radioactive. "The loan was processed 3 months ago. Unfortunately, we've documented 3 consecutive missed payments." Claire extended a trembling hand and took the main document. Her name? Claire Elizabeth Morgan. Social Security number, address, and the signature. Similar to hers, but not hers. The lines were correct, the initial C with its characteristic loop, the sharp E, the descending M, but there was something mechanical about it. Too perfect. Her own signature always trembled slightly at the end, the trace of many years of rapid writing. This one was artificial. "I didn't sign this." Gregory sighed with resignation. "Claire, I understand this is difficult, but the bank has all the necessary documentation." "Gregory." Claire raised her eyes and her voice became sharp. "I did not sign this." The identification procedure was conducted properly. "We have a copy of your license, address verification." "Do you have video?" The question rang out like a gunshot. Gregory blinked. Video recording of the signing, security cameras, data on the employee who supposedly processed this. Claire jabbed her finger at the date on the contract. March 14th. That day she'd been at work. She still had the timesheets to prove it. Such materials fall under strict confidentiality protocols. Then get authorization. Because if someone forged my signature and used my information, that's fraud. And the bank is required to verify the applicant's identity. Gregory snapped the folder shut with a dry crack. I can't just hand over internal records at a client's demand. I'm not a client. I'm an alleged debtor on a loan I never took out. The air between them froze. Gregory stood. I think you need to calm down and check your own records. Sometimes people forget about transactions. Forget $23,800? Claire stood too. You're telling me I came here for 6 years, saved every damn penny, and then suddenly forgot I took out a loan? Please, lower your voice. I won't lower my voice. Her voice rose an octave. I want to speak with your supervisor. I want access to the records. I want... Gregory walked to the office door and threw it open. You need to leave. I'm not leaving until... Immediately, Claire. She took a step toward the interior hallway, the one that led to the administrative offices, but Gregory blocked the path with his body. Move. You can't go back there. Claire tried to move around him, but Gregory grabbed her arm, not violently, but firmly enough to stop her. The physical contact shocked her so completely that she froze for half a second. A security guard appeared in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, in a Navy uniform. Any problems, Mr. Foster? This client needs to be escorted from the building. The guard approached. Claire yanked her arm free from Gregory's grip, but the guard was already too close. He placed his palm, heavy, authoritative, on her chest and pushed. She stumbled back 2 steps, 3, lost her balance. The marble floor turned out harder than it looked. The impact registered first in her knees, then in her palms. Her purse overturned, spilling its contents across the gray tile. Keys, wallet, the damned ledger where for 6 years she'd recorded every dollar. Gregory was saying something about inappropriate behavior, but the words reached her distorted, as if underwater. The guard didn't touch her again, but stood nearby, blocking any path back to the office. Gregory picked up her purse, carefully, professionally, and held it out to her. You can file an official complaint through our online portal. Claire took the purse with hands that now openly trembled. She stood, her knees protested, and walked toward the exit without looking back. The automatic doors hissed open. The 11 o'clock sun hit like a fist. The noise of traffic was deafening. She walked 3 blocks before realizing she didn't know where she was going. A small park appeared on her left. Claire turned and found a bench under a tree, sat down, breathed. Focus. She pulled the crumpled contract from her purse and smoothed it on her lap. Processing date, March 14th. Branch, Coastal Federal Bank, Harbor Boulevard. Employee code CF2891. Amount, $23,800. Someone had used her information. Someone had forged her signature. Who? The phone rang at 7:47 p.m. Claire sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by photocopies of the contract and a mug of cold coffee. The number on the screen wasn't in her contacts. She answered anyway. Claire Morgan? A male voice, professional tone, but harsh. Yes? Recovery Solutions, Collections Department? We're calling regarding your overdue debt to Coastal Federal Bank. Her stomach clenched. I already explained to the bank. Ms. Morgan, We have 3 documented missed payments on record. The total amount owed, including interest and penalties, is $26,500. Listen, I didn't take out this loan. This is fraud. We understand your situation, but you need to pay. I won't pay for something I didn't do. A brief pause. Then, Ma'am, if we don't receive payment by Friday, we'll be forced to initiate more direct collection procedures. Are you threatening me? Just information, ma'am. Have a good evening. He hung up. 40 minutes later, the phone rang again. A different, unknown number. A different voice, female this time, explaining the same procedures. When she tried to object, the woman interrupted. Someone will visit your residence tomorrow. At 9:13 p.m., someone knocked on the door. Claire froze. The knock repeated 3 times, with pauses, deliberate. She walked to the hallway mirror and checked her reflection. Took a deep breath. Looked through the peephole. A man in a dark suit, early 30s, hands in his pockets, expressionless face. Claire opened the door a crack, leaving the chain in place. Claire Morgan? Who's asking? Representative from Recovery Solutions. I need to speak with you about your payment situation. It's 9 o'clock at night. We tried to reach you during business hours. His tone was even, rehearsed. We can resolve everything right now, or tomorrow the process becomes more complicated. I have nothing to resolve. I filed an official dispute. The man took his hand from his pocket and leaned against the door frame. Claire, let's be practical. The bank has a complete package of documentation. The longer you delay, the more interest accrues. If you agree now... Claire started closing the door, but the man wedged his foot in the opening. The wood thudded dully against his boot. Remove your foot. 5 minutes. You just need to sign a payment agreement. Remove your foot. He leaned closer. He smelled of mint and something vaguely chemical. Don't make this difficult. This can be resolved amicably. Claire threw her weight against the door. The man kept his foot there for 3 more seconds, long enough to make clear who controlled the situation before removing it. The door slammed shut. At midnight, Claire still wasn't asleep. She'd checked every online transaction for the past 6 months. Nothing. No obvious security breaches. Except 3 months ago, Sophie had called. She needed a copy of Claire's driver's license for a potential job. The company required identification documents before the first interview. Claire had sent the scan without thinking. This was her sister. She took out her phone and opened old messages, found the conversation. Sophie, March 15th, 10:23 a.m. Claire, I need a favor. Claire, March 15th, 10:31 a.m. What happened? Sophie, March 15th, 10:33 a.m. Got offered an interview, but they want a copy of my license first. Like to check background or something. Can you send? Claire, March 15th, 11:02 a.m. Attachment, license front, JPEG. Attachment, license back, JPEG. Sophie, March 15th, 11:15 a.m. Thanks, you're the best. March 15th, 1 day after the contract was processed. Claire closed her eyes. No. Sophie was irresponsible. Sophie was chaotic. Sophie borrowed money and paid it back late. But this was different. This was a crime. There had to be another explanation, but every time she tried to construct an alternative version, the facts brought her back to the same place. Sophie needed money. Sophie had access to her license. Sophie knew what her signature looked like, had seen it 1,000 times. At 1:30 in the morning, Claire made a decision. She dressed, shoved the contract into her purse, and walked to the taxi stand. Maple Street, number 42. Sophie's building was in an old neighborhood with peeling facades and graffiti on the walls. The entrance light flickered. Claire climbed 3 floors up a narrow staircase that reeked of dampness and tobacco. Apartment 3B. She pressed the buzzer. Silence. Pressed again, harder. Light glowed under the door. Movement sounded inside.
Sophie, I know you're in there. Open the door.
Finally, the lock turned. The door opened 5 centimeters, chain in place, and Sophie's face appeared in the gap. Disheveled hair, swollen eyes. Claire? What time is it? Almost 2. What are you doing here? We need to talk. It's late. Now, Sophie. We can talk tomorrow. Someone used my license to take out a loan for $23,800. Claire spoke slowly, enunciating each word clearly. And the date matches exactly with the day I sent you the copy. Sophie's face tensed. I didn't. That's ridiculous. Let me in. Now's not the time. Sophie, probably some fake website. You know how these things happen. Open the door. Sophie tried to close the door, but Claire braced her hand against it. They stood on opposite sides, pushing in opposite directions.
Claire, leave!
The chain stretched taut with a metallic ring. Claire drove her shoulder into the gap and pushed. Sophie shouted something unintelligible. The chain snapped with a dry crack. The door flew open. Claire entered, and Sophie stumbled backward. The apartment smelled stale. Light from the kitchen cast long shadows. This is breaking and entering. Sophie tried to sound outraged, but her voice wavered. Here. Claire pulled the contract from her purse and held it out. Look at this and tell me you don't know anything about it. Sophie looked away. I don't understand what you're talking about. Look at me. Claire grabbed Sophie's arm. 3 months ago, I sent you a copy of my license. A day later, someone signed this contract in my name. Debt collectors are harassing me. I was shoved in the bank. Some guy showed up at my door. So you're going to look me in the eyes and tell me the truth. Tears gleamed in Sophie's eyes. She tried to turn away. Sophie, you won't understand. Try me. Papers spilled from Claire's purse. Claire pulled out an appendix, a page that Gregory had buried deep in the folder. A page where the legal representative signed for the applicant because the applicant couldn't appear in person. Claire unfolded it under the yellowish kitchen light. There it was. The second signature. Careless, hurried, but unmistakable. Sophie M. Morgan. Sophie saw her own name, and her face turned ashen. She stepped back twice, 3 times. Her back hit the hallway wall. Her voice was barely audible. Claire held the page between them like physical evidence of betrayal. What have you done, Sophie? Sophie's eyes darted around. She opened her mouth, closed it. No words came out. But Claire didn't need to hear a confession anymore. The truth was there, printed in black ink. And everything, 6 years of sacrifice, collapsed like a damned house of cards. Claire was 12 when she learned how to decipher utility bills. Her mother sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands. Sophie, she was 5 then, was sobbing in the next room because someone had broken her favorite doll. Nobody had broken anything. The doll had simply fallen. Her mother raised reddened eyes. Can you? Claire was already walking toward the bedroom. Can you meant handle it yourself. Meant I can't. Sophie lay on the floor, sobbing with disproportionate drama. The doll lay half a meter away, with a detached arm, but perfectly fixable. Look, Claire picked up the pieces. We just need glue. It's broken. It'll never be the same again. It will be if you stop screaming and help me find the glue. But Sophie didn't stop screaming until she got what she wanted. Attention, comfort, someone who would solve the problem for her. Claire found glue in the kitchen drawer, applied it with surgical precision while her mother continued sitting there, absorbed in envelopes. When she finished, she returned the doll to Sophie, who instantly stopped crying. "Thanks, Claire." Sophie smiled, that smile that melted any resentment. And Claire, 12 years old, felt resentment anyway. But in that moment, she simply returned to the table where her mother had left unchecked bills. "I'll handle it myself," Claire said. That's how it all began. Claire woke with the taste of that memory in her mouth, bitter, metallic. Dawn light filtered through the gray bedroom curtains. 6:47 a.m. She sat up in bed and surveyed the orderly room. On the desk lay a stack of bank documents proving, with brutal clarity, that someone had forged her signature. That this someone was probably her sister. Claire rubbed her face with both hands. 3 hours of sleep. Enough to function, not enough to think clearly. She rose and walked to the bathroom. The morning routine was automatic. Wash face with cold water, brush teeth for exactly 2 minutes. The mirror returned a familiar but slightly distorted image, the dark circles under her eyes more pronounced, the jawline more tense. Pull yourself together. Coffee helped. In the kitchen, she filled the coffee maker with mechanical movements. While the water boiled, she checked her phone. 7 missed calls, all from unknown numbers. She didn't listen. Instead, she opened old messages, found the conversation with Sophie from March 15th. Read it again. Sophie, March 15th, 10:23 a.m. Claire, I need a favor. Those 3 extra R's. Sophie always wrote like that when she wanted to seem cute, harmless, as if spelling could soften the weight of what would follow. Claire closed her eyes. She'd sent those photos without thinking, because this was her sister. Because "I'll handle it myself" was her Pavlovian reflex. The coffee burbled. Claire poured it into the blue mug, took the first sip standing. The heat scalded her tongue, but the pain was welcome. Something concrete, something real. The phone vibrated. Unknown number. She let it vibrate. 5 seconds later, again, different number. This time she answered. Claire Morgan? A female voice, professional but mechanical. Who's calling? Teledebt Management. We're calling regarding your credit situation with Coastal Federal Bank. I already filed an official dispute. Ms. Morgan, we understand your position, but while the investigation is ongoing, the payment obligation remains in effect. The current amount, with accumulated interest, is $27,000. The number had grown. In less than 24 hours, it had increased by $500. I won't pay a cent for something I didn't take out. A brief pause. Then, we've noted your response. Good day. At exactly 8 o'clock, Claire locked her apartment door with 2 full turns, descended the stairs, and went outside. At 9:30, she sat on a bench in the park near the bank, the crumpled contract smoothed on her lap. She didn't go back to the bank. There was no point. Gregory had made it clear. Without official procedures, there would be no help. Instead, she began dissecting the document line by line. Processing date, March 14th. Branch, Coastal Federal Bank, Harbor Boulevard. Employee code, CF2891. A code, not a name, as if the person responsible for verifying the applicant's identity was interchangeable. Faceless. Amount, $23,800. Enough to destroy her financial life. Claire ran her finger over the forged signature. The lines were correct, but there was something unnatural about this perfection. Her own signature was alive. This signature was a photograph. Flat. Dead. How many times had Sophie practiced before she dared? The phone vibrated. Claire ignored it. Again. And again. On the 7th vibration, she pulled it from her purse. The same unknown number that had called that morning. She answered. Ms. Morgan? A male voice this time, rougher. Recovery Solutions, Home Verification Department. We need to confirm your address for a scheduled visit. I didn't authorize any visits. Legal procedure doesn't require authorization with confirmed debt. I disputed the debt. This is fraud. We have a complete package of documentation proving otherwise. The visit will take place today between 2 and 6 p.m. We recommend being present to facilitate the process. And if I'm not there, then we'll resort to alternative contact methods. The line went dead. Alternative contact methods. She knew what that meant. She'd read on forums, notes on doors, calls to neighbors, visits to workplaces, public humiliation as a pressure tool. She stood and headed toward the park exit. Downtown was 15 minutes on foot. She could have taken the bus, but she needed to move, to let her body process the adrenaline. By 11 o'clock, Claire stood before an old building downtown, studying the bronze plaque. Hartwell and Associates, legal consultation. She'd passed this building hundreds of times, a geographic coincidence that now seemed like providence. Office on the 3rd floor. Claire climbed the stairs, the elevator wasn't working, and found a wooden door with frosted glass. Knocked twice. Come in. The reception area was small but tidy. A woman in her 50s looked up from the computer. Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment? No. I need a consultation about an identity theft case. The secretary nodded. Attorney Hartwell has an opening at 3:30. Will that work? 3.5 hours. Nothing earlier? I'm sorry. That's the only available time today. Claire breathed deeply. Fine. 3:30. Excellent. I'll need some basic information. Claire provided the details while the secretary filled out the form. Full name, social security number, address, phone number. The same information someone had used to destroy her financial life. All set. Please bring all documentation related to the case. I have it with me. Then you're well prepared. Claire left the building, gripping the appointment card in her hand. 3:30. 4.5 hours to decide what to do with the truth hardening in her consciousness like fresh cement. Sophie had stolen her identity, forged her signature, destroyed 6 years of work, and Claire still didn't know if she was going to report her. At 1:47 p.m., Claire was back in her apartment. She'd wandered for hours without direction, letting her feet choose the path. Now she was home, standing at the threshold with the key still in the lock. Something was wrong. The door wasn't fully closed. The wood didn't sit flush against the frame, a gap of 0.5 centimeter. Claire always locked it with 2 full turns. Always. She pushed the door slowly. The hinges creaked, a sound that usually wasn't there because she oiled them every 3 months. The door opened. Silence filled the apartment. Claire stepped inside once, twice, listened. Nothing. But something was there. A recent presence. A change in the air. She closed the door behind her, quietly, and walked into the living room. Everything seemed to be in its place, except on the carpet under the table was a dark stain that hadn't been there that morning. Small, still damp, as if someone had walked through in wet shoes. Claire crouched and ran her finger over the stain. Dirt. Fresh. Her breathing quickened. She walked to the bedroom, stepping soundlessly. The door was ajar, also something she never left. She pushed it open. The room appeared untouched, but the documents on the desk had shifted slightly. The stack of bank contracts she'd left in chronological order now had pages in the wrong sequence, as if someone had hastily flipped through them and put them back carelessly. Claire opened the top drawer, the box where she kept copies of her license, old receipts, personal documents. The box was in place, but the lid didn't fit snugly, protruding a millimeter at one corner. Someone had been here, looking for something. The phone vibrated in her purse. Claire flinched, pulled it out with shaking hands. Unknown number. Didn't answer. Immediately vibrated again. Same number. She answered. Ms. Morgan? A male voice. Different from the previous ones. Younger, more nervous. Who is this? Express delivery service. We have a package for you. Are you home? I didn't order anything. It's from Coastal Federal Bank. Legal documentation requiring signature upon receipt. Leave it at the door. You must sign in person, ma'am. This is an official notification procedure. Claire walked to the window and looked at the street. A dark car sat at the entrance. A man in a courier uniform waited by the front door. I'll be down in 5 minutes. She hung up. She wasn't going down. Instead, she dialed the local police. City police, is this an emergency? Someone broke into my apartment, Claire explained. The fraudulent loan, the debt collectors, the constant calls, the door that mysteriously ended up unlocked. The operator listened with professional patience. We'll send a patrol. Stay inside and don't open the door for anyone until officers arrive. Claire hung up and sank onto the edge of the bed. Her hands trembled. She pressed them between her knees to stop the shaking. Pull yourself together. But control slipped through her fingers like sand. 20 minutes later, someone knocked on the door. Claire looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed police officers. She opened it. Claire Morgan? Yes? We're responding to your call. Can you show us where they broke in? Claire showed them the door, the dirt stain, the shifted documents. The officers took notes, asked questions. No signs of forced entry, the younger one said. Who else has keys to this apartment? No one. Family? Friends? Claire thought about Sophie. Sophie, who had visited 3 months ago. Sophie, who had used the bathroom while Claire made coffee. Sophie, who easily could have made a copy of the key without Claire noticing. My sister, she finally said. The officers exchanged glances. Does your sister have reasons to enter without permission? It's complicated. Ms. Morgan, if there's a family conflict, we need to know about it to determine how to proceed. Claire closed her eyes, opened her mouth. The words stuck. My sister used my identity to take out a loan. My sister forged my signature. My sister is destroying me. But instead, what came out was, we have disagreements. The senior officer nodded. We advise changing your locks, and if the harassment continues, file an official report. Will that help? It creates a record. If the situation escalates, that record could be important. After they left, Claire stood in the middle of the room. Change the locks. As if a piece of metal could stop what had already entered. The phone vibrated. A text message. Unknown number. Ms. Morgan, your account has been transferred to forced collection. Respond within 24 hours or we will initiate property seizure procedures. Claire deleted the message without responding. She walked to the desk and pulled out the stack of documents. And then she saw it. On the last page of the contract, the one Gregory had kept at the very bottom of the folder, was a section she hadn't examined carefully enough. Authorized representative in case of applicant's absence. The section was filled in. Representative's name, Sophie Michelle Morgan. Relationship, sister. Representative's signature, S. M. Morgan. Careless, hurried, but unmistakably genuine. Sophie hadn't just forged Claire's signature. She had appointed herself legal representative. She had turned fraud into a technically legal document within the banking system. Claire read the clause 3 times. Then, with mechanical movements, she packed all the documents into her purse. Checked the time. 2:52 p.m. 38 minutes until the meeting with the attorney. And a decision that needed to be made. Was she going to destroy her sister? Or save herself? For the first time in 22 years, Claire didn't know which to choose. Claire arranged the documents on the kitchen table with surgical precision. Left, the bank contract with the forged signature. Center, photographs of the broken chain. Right, a handwritten list of dates and times. Every threatening call, every visit. 7:23 a.m. Coffee boiled in the maker. Claire counted to 4 on the inhale, to 6 on the exhale. A technique she'd learned from an article about stress management 3 years ago, and now applied automatically. She'd slept 4 hours. Enough to function, not enough to not feel the weight behind her eyes. She opened the laptop and a document appeared on screen, 12 carefully composed paragraphs, an official statement about identity theft and bank fraud. Claire had rewritten the first paragraph 5 times until she achieved the right tone. Neither too emotional nor too cold. She read it aloud, checking how the words sounded. On March 14th of this year, a consumer loan in the amount of $23,800 was processed and approved by Coastal Federal Bank without my knowledge or consent. Her voice sounded firm. Good. Claire printed 2 copies and placed them in the blue folder. For the first time in several days, she felt something like control. If she laid out the bank's violations clearly enough, an investigation would force the debt collectors to back off, at least temporarily. And that space, that reprieve, would give her time to find the real culprit. Because she still didn't know for certain, not officially. There were suspicions, circumstantial evidence, that gut feeling that tells you the truth before your brain is ready to accept it. But until there was concrete proof, she could continue acting as if Sophie wasn't the obvious answer to all her questions. She took the first sip of coffee. It scalded, but the pain was something tangible. The phone vibrated on the wooden surface. Unknown number. Claire let it ring through. Silence. Then immediately vibrated again. Different number. She answered. Ms. Morgan. A male voice, sharp. Recovery Solutions, confirming the scheduled visit for this morning between 9 and 11. I already told you I filed an official dispute. The dispute doesn't suspend contractual obligations. We're coming. Between 9 and 11, meaning they could appear at any moment. She packed the documents in her purse, checked the zippers, put on her shoes. The plan changed. She needed to leave now, before they arrived. She couldn't afford another confrontation in the hallway. Claire approached the door, turned the key, checked the chain, still broken, useless, and stepped onto the landing. Knocks sounded as she was turning the second lock. 3 sharp raps on wood. Not the buzzer. Knocks. Claire slowly turned around. 2 men. The tall one in a worn leather jacket held a clipboard with papers. The second, younger, held an electronic tablet. Ms. Morgan. The tall one stepped forward. We need to discuss your payment situation. I have nothing to discuss with you. I filed a report. We understand your position. The smile didn't reach his eyes. But in the meantime, we have documentation requiring your signature." He held out the clipboard. Claire saw official stamps, text in small print, a dotted line at the bottom. "I'm not signing anything." "Then we'll have to proceed with in-person property assessment." The man took another half-step forward. Claire felt her back pressed against the closed door. "It'll be easier if you cooperate." "Step back, or I'm calling the police." The man smiled. "Go ahead and call. But that doesn't change the fact that you have a legal debt, and we have the right." Claire tried to shift sideways, looking for space to break for the stairs. The man moved with her, blocking the path. And then his hand closed around her wrist. The touch was like a short circuit. His fingers squeezed hard enough to immobilize, but not hard enough to leave visible marks. Calculated. Practiced. "Let go of me!" Claire jerked her arm back. The metal of the man's watch dug into her skin. "Ma'am, you just need to sign." Claire shoved him. It wasn't a thought-out movement. Her shoulder crashed into the man's torso with all the force she could gather in a second of blind panic. He stepped back once, more surprised than hurt, and released his fingers from her wrist. Claire seized the space, fled down the stairs, taking two at a time, heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her came the man's voice. "Physical resistance documented. Proceeding per protocol." Returning to the apartment, after circling for 40 minutes, making sure the men had left, Claire slid to the floor. She looked at her wrist. A red stripe where the watch had pressed. Not a bruise. Nothing she could photograph as evidence. But the memory of those fingers around her arm remained. When had that line been crossed? At what moment had telephone harassment turned into physical contact? And when would they cross the next one? Claire closed her eyes and started counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. But her breathing wouldn't calm. She rose on trembling legs and walked to the kitchen table, turned on the desk lamp even though daylight already poured through the window. She needed additional clarity. She spread out the bank contract once more and began reading from the first clause. Applicant identification, Claire Elizabeth Morgan. Processing date, March 14th. Employee code CF2891. She opened a new tab on the laptop and found the internal directory for Coastal Federal Bank. Searched for CF2891. Didn't exist. She expanded the search to all branches in the state. Nothing. The code was fake, or outdated, or someone had invented it. Claire felt something stir in her chest. It wasn't hope yet, something smaller, more fragile, but it was there. She continued reading, looking for any detail that didn't add up. Page 3. Second form of identification verified, but no second document was attached to the copy. Loans over $15,000 required double verification as mandatory procedure. That was the law. Claire underlined the sentence with yellow highlighter. Page 5. Applicant's signature in the presence of authorized employee. But there was no employee stamp. No exact time. No mention of video recording. Another underline. Claire worked for an hour, marking every violation, every detail that turned this contract into a legal bomb. When she finished, she had 6 clear violations of banking protocol, 6 reasons this loan should never have been approved. She photographed each marked page, saved them in a new folder on her phone titled Evidence, Bank, made a backup in the cloud, and for the first time, felt something like victory. This was power. Real power. The kind that comes from being right and being able to prove it. If the bank had violated 6 mandatory procedures, then the contract was invalid. And if the contract was invalid, the debt collectors had no legal rights over her. Claire allowed herself a moment, just a moment, to close her eyes and breathe without the weight of fear pressing on her chest. She would win this. She would. The mail slot clicked. The sound was different from usual, heavier. She stood and approached the door. Through the peephole, she saw the empty landing, cautiously opened it. On the mat lay a white envelope, thick, with the Coastal Federal Bank logo. Claire's hands shook as she picked it up. She closed the door, leaned her back against it, took 2 deep breaths before tearing the paper. Inside was an official letter on letterhead. Dear Ms. Morgan, we are writing to inform you that an application has been received for a second consumer loan in your name in the amount of $30,200. In accordance with our valued customer policy, preliminary approval has been processed. To activate disbursement, you must verify your information through the attached QR code by April 8th. Claire read the date 3 times. April 8th. 5 days. If we do not receive confirmation or official refusal, the loan will be activated automatically. The letter slipped from her fingers. $30,200, plus the previous loan. $54,000 total debt. Enough to destroy her completely. And the worst part? The application date. March 29th. The very day Sophie had come over for just coffee. The day Claire had left her purse on the dining table with her license inside. There was no more room for doubt, no presumption of innocence. Sophie had done this, and she'd done it twice. Claire slid down the door to the floor, knees to chest. The tears came before she could stop them. Not sobs, just a quiet stream burning her cheeks. She thought about the 5-year-old girl with the broken doll, about the teenager who constantly borrowed money, about the 27-year-old woman who wrote, "I need a favor," with 3 extra R's, as if spelling could soften the theft she was planning. She thought about all the times she'd said, "I'll handle it myself." And she thought about what would happen if this second loan activated. She couldn't dispute 2 debts simultaneously. Legal proceedings would take years. The collectors wouldn't wait. Her credit history would be destroyed. Her life, the life built over 6 years of brutal discipline, would crumble like wet paper. Unless she stopped Sophie. Now. Before it was too late. Claire wiped her face with the back of her hand. She stood. She walked to the bathroom and washed her face with cold water until her skin went numb. Looked in the mirror. Reddened eyes, pale skin, but a firm jaw. She returned to the kitchen, put the bank letter in the blue folder with the rest of the evidence. Checked that her phone was charged. Put on the gray blouse, professional but not intimidating, and comfortable shoes. Took the folder, took the purse, took the keys, and left the apartment with a cold, crystalline clarity settling somewhere behind her sternum. This was no longer about protecting Sophie, no longer about preserving family peace. This was about survival. And Claire Morgan, the girl who learned to decipher utility bills at 12 years old, the woman who built an orderly life on the ruins of a chaotic childhood, was going to fight. To the end. With every invalid clause in the contract, with every violation of banking protocol, with every piece of evidence she could gather. Because the world doesn't reward martyrs. And she was tired of bleeding. The phone's vibration woke Claire at 6:47 a.m. Not a call, a notification. Coastal Federal Bank, dear customer, we are notifying you that consumer loan CF448291 has entered automatic activation phase. Objection deadline, 72 hours. Claire read the message 3 times, 4 times. The second loan, $30,200, was about to become real. 72 hours. 3 days to stop an avalanche that had been building for weeks.
She sat up in bed with mechanical movements.
The sheets were tangled, evidence of a night when sleep had been more a series of unconscious intervals than actual rest. Claire rose, walked to the kitchen, and turned on the coffee maker. Opened the laptop. The screen came to life, showing the last search query made at 2 a.m. Automatic loan cancellation without personal appearance, USA. The answers remained the same. Difficult, lengthy, requires substantial evidence. Claire closed the browser and opened her email. 17 new messages. 14 from Recovery Solutions, with subjects ranging from final warning to confirmation of scheduled home visit. The other 3 were spam. Nothing from Sophie. Claire dialed her sister's number for the 5th time in 2 days. 6 rings. 7. The number you have dialed is turned off or out of service range. She hung up. Tried through messaging app. Previous messages remained with 1 gray check mark.
Sophie hadn't opened the app since Tuesday.
Today was Thursday. 48 hours of absolute silence. Claire typed a new message, deleting it twice before sending, "I need to talk to you. This is urgent. Please." 1 check mark. Gray. Coffee boiled behind her, but Claire didn't move. Her fingers hovered over the phone keyboard, as if by force of will she could turn that gray checkmark blue. Nothing happened. She walked to the dining table where documents lay in meticulous order, evidence that she hadn't lost her mind. She pulled out the bank letter and placed it under the desk lamp's light. Her gaze stopped on the loan application date, March 29th, the day Sophie had come over. Coffee day. The day her purse, with her license inside, had sat on the dining table, completely accessible for a full 10 minutes. Claire closed her eyes, took a deep breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. But the stress management technique didn't work this time. Panic seeped through the cracks in her self-control. She opened her eyes and looked at her reflection in the dark laptop screen. Pale face, deep circles under her eyes, tense jaw. She didn't recognize this woman. 6 years building an orderly life. She'd given up vacations, expensive restaurants, impulse purchases, all for this freedom. And now, all that work was on the verge of vanishing because Sophie had decided that 6 years of Claire's effort was worth less than a quick fix to her own problems. $54,000 total debt. Enough to destroy her credit history, to lose the apartment, to turn the next 10 years of her life into a constant battle with institutions that wouldn't listen to explanations. The phone vibrated in her pocket. Claire pulled it out with shaking hands, hoping to see Sophie's name on the screen. Unknown number. She answered anyway. "Ms. Morgan?" A male voice. Familiar. The same man from Recovery Solutions. "Confirming the appointment for home property assessment. Today, between 10 and 12. "I already explained that I filed an official dispute. The dispute doesn't suspend contractual obligations. Additionally, we have a record of physical resistance during our last visit." A calculated pause. This complicates your legal position. Claire felt something cold settle in her stomach. "I didn't touch you. You tried to restrain me by force." "Our report says otherwise. I recommend cooperating this time." He hung up. Physical resistance, legal complications. They were building a narrative where she was the aggressor. And the worst part, it was working. Because the system only saw missed payments. For the first time in weeks, Claire allowed herself to formulate the question she'd been avoiding. Who was she really fighting? Not Sophie. Sophie was a symptom, not the disease. Not the bank. The bank was an institution following protocols. not recovery solutions. She was fighting something bigger, something she herself had built over 22 years of saying, "I'll handle it myself," every time someone needed help. Fighting the belief that her value was measured by her capacity for sacrifice. The belief that asking for help was weakness, that showing vulnerability was failure. That if she couldn't manage alone, she didn't deserve the life she'd built. And she was losing. Because the system, this collection of institutions, expectations, and family roles, was stronger than any individual. It was a machine designed to grind down people who didn't have resources, connections, or knowledge to defend themselves. Claire pressed her forehead against the cold glass. She needed help. The thought hit with the force of physical revelation. After years of being the one who helps, being the safety net for everyone else, she had to admit, she couldn't do this alone. She moved away from the window and approached the desk, opened the laptop and typed, "Attorneys Banking Law, Phoenix." Dozens of results appeared. Claire copied 3 addresses into her phone's notes. One was 2 blocks from the bank, 2 others downtown. She checked the time, 7:41. Offices wouldn't open before 9. Claire took a shower in nearly boiling water. Dressed in the gray blouse, professional but not intimidating, and dark slacks, pulled her hair into a low ponytail, applied makeup to hide the circles under her eyes, packed all the documents in the blue folder, checked that her license was in her purse, took the keys. At 8:47, she left the apartment. The morning air was fresh, almost cold. Claire walked to the bus stop with measured steps, controlling her breathing. The bus arrived on time. Claire sat by the window and watched the city wake up. Shops raising their shutters, office workers walking with coffee cups. Normal life unfolding as if the world wasn't collapsing for some people. She got off 3 stops before the bank and walked the rest of the way. Her feet carried her along the same streets she'd walked weeks earlier. She passed the entrance to Coastal Federal Bank without looking inside. 2 blocks further, she found the building. 5 stories of yellowish stone with wrought iron balconies. A plaque by the door listed several professional offices. 3rd floor, left. Victor Hartwell, attorney, civil and banking law. Claire climbed the stairs slowly, giving herself time to organize her thoughts. The building smelled of old wood and pine cleaner. A dark wooden door with a metal nameplate. Claire knocked twice. "Come in." The office was small but tidy. Shelves with legal codes. A wooden desk covered with papers organized in precise stacks. Behind the desk, a man in his 50s with metal-framed glasses looked up from a document. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Claire entered and closed the door behind her. "I need help canceling a loan I never took out." Victor gestured to the chair opposite the desk. "Start from the beginning." And Claire told him about discovering the first loan, about the forged signature, about the calls from Recovery Solutions and the men at her door, about the second loan and the 72-hour deadline expiring right now. Hartwell listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a yellow pad. When Claire finished, he extended his hand. "May I see the documents?" Claire opened the folder and began passing him papers one by one. Hartwell studied them meticulously. After 10 minutes of silence, he looked up. "This is serious." "I know." "No." Hartwell removed his glasses and cleaned them with a cloth. "I mean the bank's violations. This is very serious." Claire leaned forward. "What violations?" Hartwell opened the first contract and pointed with his pen. Non-existent employee code. Absence of second form of identification. Missing signature from authorized employee. No mention of video recording, though the law requires it for loans over $15,000. He moved to the next page. Here, absence of timestamp. Here, identity verification processed outside official banking hours. He pointed to 6 additional violations, each marked with his red pen. The bank violated its own protocols, and when a bank violates mandatory protocols, the contract loses legal force. Something stirred in Claire's chest. Not hope yet. Something smaller, more cautious.
So I can cancel it?
We can try, but I need something critically important. Hartwell looked directly at her. I need the person who forged your signature to give testimony. Officially, with witnesses. The air left Claire's lungs. My sister. If your sister confesses to committing fraud, combined with these bank violations, we'll have a strong case. Without her testimony, the bank will claim you signed the contracts. Claire closed her eyes. Sophie, not answering messages for 48 hours. Sophie, who had stolen her identity twice. Sophie, who would probably be terrified at having to face the consequences of her actions. What if I can't get her testimony? Hartwell put his glasses back on. Then we'll fight with just the bank violations. Winning is possible, but much harder, and the second loan will activate before we get to court. Claire opened her eyes. How much time do we have? To file a motion for an injunction suspending activation of the second loan, we need to submit the application by tomorrow at noon. That gives us... Hartwell checked his watch. 26 hours. 26 hours to find Sophie, convince her to confess, get signed testimony. It meant asking her sister to condemn herself. Claire opened her mouth to respond when the phone in her purse began vibrating. She pulled it out with trembling hands. Sophie. The name blinked on the screen like a ghost. Claire raised her eyes to Hartwell, who nodded slightly. She answered, Sophie? Silence on the other end, heavy breathing. Then a voice Claire barely recognized, small, broken. Can I come see you? Claire felt something tighten in her throat. Where are you? Downstairs. On the street. I saw you go into the building. I need to talk to you. Claire looked at Hartwell, who pointed to the clock on the wall. 10:15 in the morning. Come up, 3rd floor, door on the left. She hung up. Hartwell stood and walked to a small coffee maker in the corner of the office. I'll make coffee. You'll need it. The next 3 minutes stretched like hours. Claire listened to every sound in the hallway, then quiet knocks on wood. Hartwell opened the door. Sophie entered slowly. Her sister had lost weight. The skin under her eyes was dark, almost gray. Hair pulled into a messy bun, and her hands clutched a manila folder pressed against her stomach. Sophie looked uncertainly at Hartwell, then at Claire. I didn't know you'd be with a lawyer. Sit down. Claire's voice sounded firmer than she felt inside. Sophie sat in the chair next to her sister, still holding the folder against her chest like a shield. Hartwell set 3 mugs of coffee on the table and sat back down. I'm Victor Hartwell, your sister's attorney. What you say here stays between us, unless you decide otherwise. Sophie nodded without looking at him. Her eyes remained fixed on Claire. I saw the messages. The ones where you said it was urgent. Her voice trembled. And I know why. She opened the folder and pulled out several papers, placed them on the table with shaking hands. Claire recognized some, copies of loan contracts, but there were other documents she hadn't seen before. Receipts for bank transfers, printed emails, handwritten notes. I did this. The words came out in a broken whisper. Both loans. Forged your signature. Used your license when you came to visit me. Claire said nothing. couldn't. Sophie continued, words accelerating as if she had to get them out before she lost courage. I thought I could pay it all back before you found out. The first loan. I was going to find a job. I was going to. She broke off, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. But everything got worse. Private lenders started calling. And then I found out I was pregnant, and he left, and I. Her voice broke completely. Hatwell pushed a box of tissues across the table. Sophie took one, pressing it to her face. And I took out the second one because I thought if I paid off the private lenders first, I'd have time to fix everything else. But I just made it worse. She raised her eyes to Claire, reddened. I know I don't deserve for you to listen to me. I know I destroyed your life. But I had to tell you the truth. Claire looked at the documents scattered across the table. Evidence of betrayal. Years of family dysfunction. Why now? Her voice sounded strangely calm. Why did you decide to show up now? Sophie took a deep breath, placing her hand on her stomach in an almost unconscious gesture. Then let's do this right. I'll document your official testimony right now. Then we'll prepare the motion for tomorrow. He looked at both sisters. It won't be easy, but if we work together, we have a good chance of winning. Sophie looked at Claire, waiting for something. Permission, acceptance, any sign that her sister didn't hate her completely. Claire took a deep breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, then nodded once. Let's begin. And in that small office on the 3rd floor, where the air filled with the smell of coffee and documents of family nightmare lay scattered on the desk, 2 sisters began the process of untangling 22 years of broken patterns. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was for the first time honesty. And for now, that was enough.